Welcome to Ministry Convos. This is Eric.
And this is Rebecca. And today we're going to sit down and talk about a conference that I was able to go to a few days ago. And I had the privilege to go all the way to New Orleans to be a part of the Abide Women's Conference that they put on this year. This is an annual women's conference that they put on. It's called Abide, and each year it has a different theme. And this year the theme was Women of Prayer. This is put on by their women's ministry department. And New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary is one of the 6 SBC seminaries. And most of the other seminaries, if not all, have a women's department, and they do various things. I know when Eric was a student on campus and we lived in Fort Worth at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, I was able to take part in some of their women's ministry things. They had Medici, which is a way to encourage the seminary wives. We'd have a monthly luncheon type thing. Well, actually, it was a dinner. And we'd have a speaker come in just to encourage us in our life as seminary wives. They also had a certificate program where you could study alongside your husband at a very discounted price so that you're preparing for ministry while he's preparing for ministry. And it was classes specific to helping those wives. And then at New Orleans, now I'm getting to know that seminary well, as Eric's a student there now, working on his DMin. And so I had found out about this conference actually this summer because we were at the SBC annual meeting and it was in New Orleans. And so the seminary played a big role in providing music and different things like that throughout the conference. And I had seen the flyers and I was really excited. And I actually didn't say anything to Eric because I'm like, well, this is New Orleans and we live in Ohio and I don't know how I'm going to get to go. But he surprised me and suggested he could give it to me as a graduation present. So I graduated in December, and I got to finally enjoy this gift, and it was awesome now in February.
I was really glad you wanted to go. When I told you about it, I was like, I don't know, I didn't want you to think I was pushing you towards, schooling or anything like that because you just finished. So I was kind of nervous. So when you said, yes, I want to go, I was like, oh, good.
Well, I will say I was particularly interested because it's Women of Prayer, and I knew I was struggling a bit in my prayer life. I was a little bit discouraged, just thinking about how should I pray for certain situations? How should I pray for others? What's the balance between always praying for what we want and praying for God's will to be done or for God to be glorified in a situation? So I was very eager to go and learn about prayer because I knew that was an area I was seeking to grow in, and it was great. The main key speakers, there was 4 women, 2 of them pastors' wives, and the other 2, I believe both of them have been pastors' wives before. And they were they each took a section of the Lord's Prayer. And so that's how they taught their main sessions, was each taking a little segment, and it was good. And then the breakout sessions that they had talked about a variety of things, from praying for your husband to wrestling with unanswered prayer, praying for your children, praying through scripture. There were so many good things. I didn't get to go to them all, but they actually offered the audio of the conference, and you could purchase that so that you could listen to all the breakout sessions. And something cool they did that I've never seen at a women's conference before was they had every breakout session twice. So if you missed it the first time, maybe you could catch it the second time, and I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, before we get to, I kind of want to like to get you to share a little bit of what you learned and picked up in those sessions. But before we do that, I have a question for you, and that is, you have been involved in women's ministry for many years, long before your Bible college days in a number of ways. And then eventually, after graduating, you helped out in the dean's office, and then we went to Texas, we went back to California. You eventually became the dean of women at our Bible college, so you have some experience in women's ministry. However, I will say, just by watching you lately, when I went to Southwestern and then now, your excitement for women's ministry has really, really ticked up more than ever. And I've really watched that excitement and passion of yours blossom. So my question is this: what makes women's ministry different in the SBC than from the circles that we came from?
That's a great question. And the first thing I would say is probably education. my sister came with me, and one thing she noted is she's like, wow, these people really speak with, I can't remember exactly how she said it, with authority, maybe something along those lines. And I said, well, that's because the people that are speaking in these sessions are expert in that area. I mean, we got to hear from a lady who was a professor in counseling at the seminary, and she was speaking on your emotional and spiritual health. And so that it's a different caliber. You can speak to somebody from life experience, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that is helpful. But when you have really studied, and so many of these women that were speaking even had PhDs, there's just a different quality and a different level of the way that you speak and the quality information that you're giving. And I really appreciated that. And that was something different. I think another thing, worship, I think there's always a little bit more of emotions involved in worship at times, especially for women. But I didn't feel like all the sessions were, it wasn't just emotional hype, emotional fluff. It was good, solid, Bible-based teaching given to us by women with years of ministry experience and also theological education to go along with that. And I really appreciated that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So they didn't lack the personal experience. They just really also have some really good theological education also. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes a difference, I think, too, to speak in an area that you're very passionate in and you've really studied. So it's not just, shooting from the hip. You were assigned a topic and now you're going to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what are some highlights you learned from some of the sessions?
Well, there was so much good stuff. I told my sister, who was there with me, I said, I used to be such a perfectionist that I thought, man, if I go to a conference or something and I don't hang on every word and take, a whole huge notebook full of notes and get everything and internalize everything, then it was a waste. But at the end of the day, will you really go home and work on all of those things? And I told her, I was like, if we get one good thing from every session that we can go home and apply to our lives, then that's great, because that's something that we could do and we'll remember those things. And so I think some of the good takeaways, I already mentioned this, but the breakout session where we got to hear from their counseling professor, and she was talking about praying for her husband. I'm sure you'll laugh at this, Eric, because I know I was challenged and there was a few things you were like, oh, yeah, well, I could see where you maybe could work on that a little bit. You were nice about it. Yeah, right. Hopefully it was worth the investment just from that session. But talking about how prayer, first of all, is very intimate. And so a lot of times couples will not pray freely and openly with one another because your relationship with God, when you're really pouring your heart out to Him, is such an intimate thing. Sometimes they won't get to that level of intimate praying with one another or in front of one another out loud. And then another thing she talked about was listening, just to give empathy and to give love and to give care rather than trying to give a solution to the problem. And then once you've listened, when your spouse is going through a difficult time, to then pray. She said, pray, but don't pray to give a solution. And I was like, ooh, like that's really good. Because sometimes,
Wow.
I've even done that if a woman has asked me to pray and I'm like, please just help her to do blah X, Y, Z. And without realizing I was praying a solution into the prayer. So she's like, no, just like talk about this is how your spouse feels about this pressure that they're experiencing, this health crisis they're experiencing, whatever that may be. And then with the sessions, the main sessions, they called them plenary sessions, and those were the ones going through the Lord's Prayer. There was a couple things that stood out to me. I don't know. It's hard to narrow it down to maybe the top 3 sessions. A standout moment from Tara Dew, and she was speaking on the very first part of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And she said, be careful that you do not pray for your will to be done or your name to be great. And I thought about that because often we can come to God. And she talked about, God is our Abba Father, when it says our Father and what that means. Whenever you think of the best Father you can think of, God, our Father, is so much better than that. And all of us know in our hearts and our minds what a good father should look like. But then she pointed out, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Yes, we can run to him like a daddy and just pour out our hearts to him, but also recognize that he's holy and he's in charge and he knows what's best. And so instead of, praying that basically, let me just come to you and then you give me everything that I want, recognizing his holiness. So I thought that was really good. I have my notebook here and I have notes sliding out of it everywhere because it was good. Another good thing I thought was Andrea Lennon, and she's a pastor's wife from Arkansas that was speaking, and she was talking about the part, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And she said, a forgiven life and a forgiving life lead to an abundant life in Christ. And I thought that was really good. Recognizing that God has forgiven you. So don't wallow in guilt and self-pity and things like that. Name your sin for what it is, repent of it, and then walk in that forgiveness. And then also forgive others. And that's the way to the abundant life. And I just thought that was a really good takeaway. And then the last one that I'll mention, I could mention a lot more. Like I said, there was 4 plenary sessions and there was 3 breakout sessions, and all of it was so good. I could probably talk for hours on here. But I went to Katie McCoy's session on wrestling with unanswered prayers, and I had met Katie McCoy and gotten to sit in a Bible study with her teaching when I was a member of Travis when we lived in Fort Worth, and she's since moved on to a different ministry and is serving God really well in her new spot. But I knew her, so I'm like, I kind of want to go to support her, and it was wrestling with unanswered prayer, and I was like, do I have an unanswered prayer? I don't know, but I'm sure it's going to be good, and sure enough, it was really good. And there was some things that I realized there of just, sometimes you don't realize that there's something on your heart that you're wrestling with. And even just sitting there, God brought something to mind. But she shared so many things. And one thing, she gave all these examples and of Bible women. And she said, let it go or lose it. And she was talking about, Hannah wrestled in prayer. She didn't have a child. She wanted a child. But then she gave Samuel back to God. He gave her that child, and then she gave it back to God. Or Martha. Martha said, Lord, please come and heal my brother. And Jesus delayed, and Lazarus died. And then he was raised to life, but eventually he was going to die again. And then with Elizabeth, she was the mother of John the Baptist, who was eventually beheaded. And she wrestled with God in prayer because she didn't have children for a while. And I just thought that was good. She went through a lot of lies too, and used Bible examples to answer how those things are not true. Like God's plan won't be worth it. And she talked about, again, Elizabeth, that she wrestled in prayer for a very long time, and then God gave her a son, and that son was John the Baptist, and how amazing that was. Or God doesn't have a plan here. And she gave the truth that God cared for Naomi when she was struggling, and she went and she said about her, I thought it was really good. Whether you are a Naomi or a Mara, which means bitter, depends on your view of God. And how when Mara, or Naomi, when she came back to Israel, she told everybody, call me Mara, and she was very bitter, but she had kind of gotten her eyes off of God and the fact that God was still going to take care of her, and he did in a miraculous way.
Well, they all sound like great sessions.
It really was. Like I said, I could probably talk all night because it was all really, really good content. So.
Well, here's the kicker question going all the way across the country. Would you go again?
I would, yes. Actually, when it was over, I was like, oh man, I wish I could just sign up today, but I'm not going to assume that I can just fly across the country every year for a conference like that. But yeah, it was very good, and kind of partly too coming from Ohio, and you guys were getting snow, and it was 27 degrees, I think, one day when I checked, and I got a snow alert that woke me up, and I was down there in the 70 degrees and the warm sunshine and walking around the beautiful campus. And My sister, who hadn't been there before I was there this past summer, was like, wow, like how old is this school? I feel like we're walking on a Harvard or an Oxford campus or something like that. Like you get the sense that it's been very well established. And I think that one was established in 1917,
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
New Orleans. It's
Yeah.
the third oldest. It was Southern and then Southwestern and
Yeah.
then New Orleans.
I can always remember Southwestern because I graduated from there, and that was 1908. And that one came just a few years after. So there is something really special about that too. Just getting to be there on a beautiful historic campus. It's very refreshing just to be there and in nature. And they did a wonderful job. If I could describe New Orleans in one word, it would be joy. And that's what we experienced when we were there in the summertime. And that's what I experienced this time. I mean, every single person wearing a purple t-shirt, because that's one of their colors, that was there holding a sign or whatever, great big smile on their face. And they would greet you. Even if you were talking to somebody, they'd be like, have a great day or good morning or have a good night or whatever. It was just a joyful place to be.
I'm sure you were introduced to a lot of new names down there, some of which you knew, some people you didn't know. So I got a question for you. We have a lot of listeners from, SBC Our Lives, but also from our non-SBC life that we still, love those people, actively involved in a lot of things. Who are some good ladies, maybe some of our non-SBC female listeners, like maybe from our, old King James only circles and stuff like that? Who can they follow on social media, look up on YouTube? Where can they go if they're not in the SBC circles? Who should they be, looking up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not a huge podcast listener, which is ironic considering that we do a podcast. But I do love books, and I love bringing a book and the car rider line when I'm picking up my boys. Just always having something I'm working on. In fact, I have too many books. I have several of them that I need to wrap up and finish. And they had a book signing. I went to actually the pre-conference where they had a few breakout sessions and they introduced us to the main keynote speakers, and they had some fellowship times with a popcorn bar and some fun things like that. But the book signing was 3 people. It was Jamie Dew, who is the president of New Orleans at OBTS. They had Tara Dew, his wife, and they had Emily Dean, and they were all there for a book signing. And so those are all names. I would listen to the things that they have to say. I had told my sister, I said, Tara Dew, when I was talking to her about who we would see and who we would hear from, I said, she is the person. And maybe this is why there's so much joy at NOBTS, because of her. I don't know. But I said, I have never met somebody that was more joyful. She is always smiling. She is always happy. And then we get up there, and I was buying her book to get it signed by her. And her book title is Overflowing Joy. And I didn't even know. I knew she was doing a book signing. But so I thought, I was like, man, how appropriate. So I bought that. I got that signed by her, had a little convo with her, and it's a great book. In fact, I read almost half of it on my flight home. It was so good I couldn't put it down. And then Emily Dean, who does a lot of teaching, has a teaching role there. She wrote a book called Women Leading Well, and it has a foreword by Katie McCoy. And both of those ladies, I'm looking forward to getting to learn more from Emily Dean, because just reading through her credentials when I was looking through ahead of time about the speakers and everything she's done, she has years and years and years of experience in women's ministry. So I can imagine this book is going to be gold, and I will probably give a book review on this later when I finish reading that one. But Emily Dean, Katie McCoy has a passion for women's ministry. She speaks on gender confusion and things like that. She has a book, and the name is escaping my mind right now.
Is it bad if I know it?
To Be a Woman.
Yep.
Yes. And that is an excellent book. It's hard to read because she delves into all the difficult things that drive women to transgender type of things, or if they're trying to come out of it, and all those sorts of things. Lots of scientific studies, very academic, but well worth taking your time and reading through it. And if you're a youth pastor's wife, if you're a mom of teen girls, I highly recommend that one. And Katie has also contributed to a lot of other books too. So the things that she has out there are excellent materials.
Yeah, and she really contributes a lot to that, to the gender issue, which is beneficial not just for, for ladies, but for men also, because it's an issue that we're all faced with in this modern society today. Like, this issue is alive, and she is a really good voice tackling one of the toughest subjects right now.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I thanked her after her session. I said, when I was reading your book, I realized how difficult that must have been to even read and research all of those things. And I just thank you for writing those materials.
And New Orleans is not the only seminary that does these conferences. I mean, I think all of the 6 SBC seminaries have ladies departments, at least, where they prepare the wives as well.
Yes.
So these conferences and all these other activities and ministries and things, they're not only for SBC people. Anybody can go to them. Anyone can register for them, and they're all over the country. So
yes,
just some good resources out there for men and women.
Yeah, and for people that are listening that are not part of the SBC, there is Gateway Seminary, that's in California. There is NOBTS, New Orleans, and that is in New Orleans. There is Southwestern, that is in Fort Worth. There is Southeastern, and that one is it North Carolina?
Yep, Wake Forest.
North Carolina. And then there is Southern. So we have all the South names. That always confused me. It took me forever. And Southern is in Kentucky. Was that all of them? I feel like Midwestern. Yes.
Kansas City.
I live in the Midwest and I forgot Midwestern. Okay. Yeah. Midwestern and Kansas City. And so all of them have great things. I mean, whichever one you're close to, it's nice that they're scattered around so you can take advantage of that, or even just follow their women's ministry. Look and see who is leading that, who is teaching that. A lot of these seminaries have programs to teach women's ministry or women's leadership. The name of the degree program might be different, but even if you're not interested in a degree, look and see who are the professors that are speaking there, and I can guarantee you that you'll find some great podcasts, some great books, great blogs, articles, things like that would be helpful.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience at the Abide Conference, and to our listeners, we'll see you next time on the next Convo.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.